Well, we have got the entire crew here, and it is 3:02. So we're going to begin. We're going to hold hold this to an hour. I'm just going to start us off by explaining why we're here. For those of you that may not know who I am, I'm Jeff Good. I'm in the restaurant business. Bravo, Broad Street, and Salamukis is my trade. My partner and I, Murrah High grads, started that 26 years ago, and we've been in the city doing business for 26 years. I've had a lot of experience with water failures, utility failures in the restaurants. And when this crisis happened, the first week it occurred, my phone was ringing off the hook and lots of messages on Facebook and emails, people asking, why is this happening? You know, there's got to be a way to fix this. And can't someone do something? And, you know, we're paying taxes. Why can't it get done? And it dawned on me that after talking to some folks, so many people really don't understand the mechanics of, you know, there's questions like, why is there water in North Park, but there's no water on the other side of the county line? And where does the water come from? How can it be two different water places? So I reached out to the mayor and Dr. Williams and Jordan Hillman, and I'll introduce them all in just a moment, and asked, is there a way that we might be able to do something like this, to have a presentation for all those who would be interested to learn how the water sewer system actually works, from source to sewer, where we get the water, how it gets distributed, and where it goes. Because civic knowledge and education is a basic tenet of being a good citizen and being able to work together with others to make things happen. So my other job this year is I'm the chair of the Greater Jackson Chamber Partnership, the business entity, the business organization that's pro-business and pro-economic development. And this is, it's been great to see Jackson on the news, Mr. Mayor, for the past month, but not really. You know, that's not really a great thing for us to be on the news about. So we have a moment here where we have the nation's attention. And if we as a citizenry can become as educated as possible as to how the system works, and then where we need to go next and how we can work together. And I think the beauty of this is I reached out 2.5 weeks ago, and the pledge was, when the crisis passes, we'll take this time to do it. So the crisis has passed, but we're just ready for the next crisis. I think everyone on the screen would agree to that. So I'm hoping towards the end of our conversation, we can talk about maybe some marching orders that the mayor and the leadership staff of the city would give us. And so that brings us to me introducing everyone and then passing the mic to the mayor. So first of all, on my screen from left to right, I'm seeing a still shot of Cynthia Buchanan. Cynthia has been with the Chamber of Commerce for years and years, and she handles legislative relationships and business development work. And she is acting as the behind the scenes invisible hands to make sure all this works. So Cynthia, thank you for being here. On the far right-hand side, I see Dr. Safia Amari, and Dr. Amari is the Chief of Staff for the Mayor, and a pleasure to have you here, Madam. Next down on the right, going clockwise, Jordan Hillman, Director of the Planning and Development Department, everything from permits to economic development to the bus system. In the middle screen, we have Carla Dazzett. I hate to out you, Carla, but Carla is in charge of the water and sewer billing system. So there you go. Not her fault, trying her best. On the far left, we have Dr. Charles Williams. He is the director of the Public Works Department. So he is the boss for all things from roads to sewers to the water system we're going to talk about. And then on the bottom of my screen, I have our mayor, Mayor Chokwe Antar Lumumba. And Mr. Mayor, I think with this introduction, our goal, Dr. Williams has prepared a presentation. We have a few agenda points we'd like to make sure we cover just to go through this process. And then we were going to offer up the ability to answer some questions at the tail end through Q&A. So would love to pass the baton to you and let you kind of start us off, sir.
Well, first and foremost, I thank you for the opportunity to have this presentation. I'm thankful for all of the members of our business community. I want them to know that the city of Jackson values them, that our small businesses are the lifeblood of our city, and without you, we could not exist, we could not thrive. And so this is an issue that we are equally concerned about, so that we can bring sustainable, equitable infrastructure that not only our residents depend on, businesses. So I thank you for this opportunity so we can explain many of the misnomers about our water system. And I've seen a few questions pop up already. Just one housekeeping matter. I think some people said that they couldn't see the full panel. I think that might be a matter of the view that you're in on this particular platform. I think if you go into the top right-hand corner, you can change the view if you want to look at one individual, the speaker view, or if you want to look at the entire panel. So that's one housekeeping matter. I will give kind of the overarching challenges and the overarching concerns that we have, and then I will ask Dr. Williams, who I think has prepared a presentation to explain our water system. First and foremost, for those that have heard me talk about the comprehensive infrastructure challenges that we have, I've shared that Jackson, when asked the question, we were talking really about, a federal infrastructure package in an interview. And I talked about Jackson having a comprehensive $2 billion problem. I didn't say that our water system costs $2 billion. And honestly, that estimate is probably a more conservative estimate. The reason that we know that is that, the EPA has estimated our wastewater challenge at about $1 million. I'm sorry, $1 billion. I wish it were $1 million. They have estimated that at $1 billion. That's before we get to drinking water. That's before we get to storm water. As you remember, we dealt with a 30-year flood. We deal with communities that flood when we have flash flooding. That's before we get to roads and bridges. And so it's probably a conservative estimate at best. But it is unfortunately not a unique story of legacy cities that have aged. And that is where we are, is that we have a really aged system that the city's annual budget, the revenue that the city brings in is insufficient to meet that need. When we look at these challenges, if we compare even the freeze of 2018 to what we've experienced this year, that was analogous in the sense that it was both on account of an aged infrastructure, but it was different issues that affected us. In 2018, we ultimately suffered complication in the distribution system because of pipes that burst all across the city because the ground froze. It led to so many pipes bursting that we had to bring in private contractors to help with the repairs, right? These pipes many of them are over 100 years old. They don't consult us when they decide that, hey, I've had enough and you got to change me. And so that's one challenge. The other challenge that we've experienced most recently, I guess the easiest way to surmise it is to say that first and foremost, it was an attack at the plant where the plant crashed in many regards. But one of the main or initiating points in the plant is at the raw water screens, the very inception point from which water comes into the reservoir, from off the reservoir into the treatment facility. They crashed and they froze in many instances. And so we couldn't get water in to the plant. Therefore, we couldn't treat water to get water out. It created complications with the valves where valves froze, created complications with mechanical instruments and electrical instruments where it crashed somewhat like a computer. It brought the PSI to the plant all the way to a 37, that's pounds per square inch. And our water treatment facility operates off of hydraulics, meaning we have to push water through the system. And so the areas that were most challenged were areas that were furthest away from the treatment facility, the furthest place that the water had to go, and areas that were on higher elevations, meaning that not only the water had to travel that distance, but it also had to make it up that hill. And so the way we're able to make it up the hill is the amount of pressure that we're able to push through the system so that it ultimately can journey upwards and journey as far as it needs to go. And so I think that this is an important conversation for many reasons, not only so that we can educate and understand how this system operates, but that we can be, a unified force in how we address this problem, not only in terms of pulling together resources, but in terms of advocating on Jackson's behalf. While I would certainly enjoy Jackson being on national news for much more positive matters, it still is an opportunity to mount pressure to make sure that all vested and responsible parties come to the table and say, look, let's work to figure this out. Let's work to not only see how we solve some of the immediate needs that are identified in our constant conversations with the EPA, our constant study and analysis of our system. The city of Jackson doesn't suffer from not having a plan or not having, an evaluation or not having peer review of what what's happening at our water treatment facility. What the city of Jackson suffers from is while we've had these plans, while we've had peer reviews, what we haven't had is the finances or the revenue to implement what the plans have revealed. And so that's why we can no longer kick this can down the road. Each and every year, I go to the State House and meet with our lieutenant governor, our governor. I meet with the Speaker of the House, and I tell them what our legislative agenda is. And it invariably always includes a measure of support for our infrastructure woes. I go to Washington, D.C., where I've met with our congressional delegation to tell them about the support we need. What we've recently heard about Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith proposing a bill, and we're grateful for that. We are going to operate with a coalition of the willing in order to support our infrastructure issues. But one of the things she drew out was the WARDA funds that were authorized but not allocated to this, allocated but not authorized but not appropriated to the city of Jackson, that we've been talking about since 2007. That was authorized for the city of Jackson back in 2007. And we've gone each and every year to say, listen, the no new starts ban that Congress has employed doesn't apply to us because this was authorized to the city of Jackson prior to that no new starts ban. And if we can get the $27 million that has been authorized but not appropriated to the city of Jackson, then we can benefit off that. We can fix many of the things that we need to address on our drinking water and wastewater side. And so these are the things that we've been lifting up for some time. Before I turn it over to Dr. Williams, I also want to speak to a few other issues that I've heard come up in these conversations that people just want to know about, right? One would be the issue of water billing, right? The reason if you have put on, and I saw somebody put on the chat, I hadn't got a water bill in some time. If you haven't gotten a water bill, it's not because people in the water department are incompetent and can't figure out how to get you a bill. It's because the meters that we have, they don't communicate with the interface. They don't communicate properly with what we call repeaters. And those repeaters are not sending the signal to our billing department so that we can have consistent billing. And so when those bills are unstranded, what that means is that they're ultimately clearing out the cycles of bad bills that have not been received for some time. But what is going to solve it is ultimately repairing the system and implementing a new system, right? There's a multitude of issues as to why that is taking place. One of the reasons we were able to secure the settlement from Siemens is because Mueller, the manufacturer of the water meter, their shareholders started suing them themselves because they had a higher than usual failure rate of those meters. Mueller has been making water meters for many, many years. What they have not been making for quite as long are communication devices that communicate the consumption rate of your water, speak to the repeater, and send it to our billing department. And because that is the point of failure, that is the point where people's consumption is being read day by day by day, held in some circumstances for a year or more, and then released all of a sudden. And so you're hit with those high water bills because it hasn't been properly communicating. And so what we have and where your Siemens dollars have gone towards, they have gone towards a multitude of things. First and foremost, we thought it important to have community discussions about how we were going to spend those Siemens dollars, even prior to spending a dime. And we did so. Not everybody joined those conversations, but we explained what we had to do. If you remember correctly, the city of Jackson took a loan out from its general fund to apply to the enterprise fund because we were losing so much money, we couldn't meet regular operations and maintenance costs. Not to mention, we couldn't meet our debt service costs from purchasing the meters in the first place. And so what we had to do was pay back that loan. We had to do so per our state audit, per all of the finances, because we took that loan. And so we paid that back. Additionally, we were out of compliance with our bond holders. What that means is that as we have an enterprise fund, as we take out bonds for road projects over the years to install these meters, there is an insurance company that insures our bonds. It's called Assured Guarantee. Part of our bond covenant is that we have to keep a certain amount of money in escrow, right? so that when those bond payments come up, they can draw it right out of the accounts that per our agreement, we would keep them in. Because we were in such financial straits with our enterprise fund, because the billing system is not what we need it to be ultimately, we were out of compliance with those covenants. And so we had to reimburse or place in those accounts the money that we agreed and said we would put in that account. The reason that we have to do that is because if we don't, then we're out of compliance and we lose our insurance coverage. What does losing our insurance coverage mean? That means that it makes our bonds callable. That means that the city of Jackson would be responsible to pay $300 million all at once, based on how much bond capacity or how much loans we have taken out over the years. Obviously, we're not in position to do that. So we would have been in receivership if we didn't make that decision to put that in the escrow account. Lastly, the remaining amount of money has to go towards fixing the system. If we don't fix the system, then we'll be in this problem from now until eternity, into perpetuity. And so that money is there to fix the system so that you can get a dependable system, so that you can rely on those bills, being provided to you year after year. The reason that those bills are important is not only to be able to provide a reliable and timely source of an accounting of your usage so that you can pay them at a fair rate and on time, but it also serves to help support things like our water treatment facility. It is our enterprise system that pays for those things. We can't even pay for those things out of the general fund, right? Because then we get taxed for the accounting process or improperly using money on our general fund side for enterprise related matters. And so that brings our bond rating down when we do those things. That's what Moody's and S&P, that's why we were able to get a better grade, is because we corrected those measures. Your bond rating has everything to do with your ability to do these projects, at a reasonable cost and a reasonable expense, so that you're not in junk bond status and paying an absolute premium for the many, many things we need to do. So that's a higher level view of many of those things. It becomes a pretty complicated process, but I'm sure Dr. Williams can explain how water service is provided to the city of Jackson a lot easier than I can. And so I'd like to pass it to Dr. Williams to do so. Thank you.
Dr. Williams, while you log on there, I just want to say thank you, Mr. Mayor. That was extraordinary. And that is exactly the kind of linear discussion that just really helps explain the details behind what is a very complex business. I mean, the city is it's huge. Yeah. And so thank you for explaining that.
I appreciate that. And I saw a question that said, when will I get a bill? Let me explain that. We have already started the process of revamping our water billing and metering system. We have hired a program manager, which we did not have the first time. We purchased the largest system. We expended the largest amount of dollars in our city's history without a project manager, a program manager. And so we've hired a program manager to oversee that process. Bids have gone out. First thing we purchased was a new billing software. The billing software that we had was end of life. It was called CCMB, and it's operated and given to us by Oracle, which is a trusted, multinational corporation. They no longer support CCMB, and so we have gone to their new product, which is C2M, right? That's the billing software. That costs millions of dollars to employ a new billing software. And now we're going through the bids of not only the meters, right? Where we're accepting proposals. We actually have put that out, and we're going to have to put that out again. So it'll be within a matter of months. We have a full schedule of how that is going to be applied. And so we're putting it out for new meters to be installed and a new system, a new software that interfaces with that system to be installed. And so you will start seeing those new meters installed, and that is what is going to lead to you being able to get the consistent bill. We can't expect a bad, non-functioning system to be able to resolve the issue, because it is an issue of res ipsa loquitur, right? That is one of those legal Latin terms. The problem is the thing itself, right? And the thing itself is inoperable and does not work as it should. And so we have to replace the thing. We have to replace the meter. And that is what is going to lead to you getting better bills. And that is already in the works of taking place. Now I'm done. Dr. Williams, it's yours.
Well, my former Callaway Latin teacher wife would give you an A+ on the use of Latin there. So if Debbie's listening, she just gave you a thumbs up. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Charles Williams, I've had the honor of getting to know him because of all the problems we've dealt with over the years. I've seen him in neighborhoods. I've seen him at bridges that have failed, and we've talked about water issues. And I'll tell you that this gentleman needs to be wrapped in bubble wrap and kept safe, because his institutional knowledge for our city is second to none. And between he and Bill Miley, we have a couple of amazing men who really understand what's underneath the ground without having to have a map. We're very fortunate to have Dr. Williams at the helm. And Dr. Williams, the podium is yours, sir.
I appreciate that. I'm going to try and share my screen. Let's see. I might need Cynthia to give me permission. I think I'm gonna need Cynthia to unlock it for me, Mr. Good.
I promise.
Dr. Williams, the button in the middle, share screen.
I just hit it.
Okay.
I hope it's not on my end.
Okay.
It keeps saying host disabled, participant screen sharing.
I knew we wouldn't make it through this without a challenge.
Okay, try it now.
All right.
Got
There
it?
we go. Okay.
Thank you, Cynthia.
All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right. Okay. We good?
Yes, sir.
All right. Good deal. Thank you all for having us this afternoon. I'm going to try and not be very technical, as I have been told in prior presentations. So this slide is a collaboration of information that you may have already seen. I tried to not reinvent the wheel, but try and tell the story of our water system in Jackson. Jackson's water system is well over 100 years old. Started from a private water company back in 1888. At a point, many of our residents at that time used to go and basically take water from the Pearl River, have a charcoal can, pour it over the charcoal can in order to filter the process. And at that particular time, as you know, that's really not water quality. So at a point around 1908, the city of Jackson purchased that private water company due to they started expanding, populated, started to increase. And so around 1914, JH Fuel was constructed and served water for a majority of the city of Jackson over a number of years, well into the early 80s. And in the early 80s, the O.B. Curtis was constructed on the conventional side was built. The conventional side has 3 basins and a raw water screen that brings water in from the reservoir. In 1997, we added the sludge handling system at around 1997. And then in the early 2000s, we constructed what we call the membrane system. So combined, the city, if fully functional, O.B. Curtis can provide over 50 MGD, 1 million gallons per day of water for the citizens of Jackson. What we have is 2 pictures. On the left, that's O.B. Curtis. That's actually a picture of the membrane system. We have 6 trains that help us operate O.B. Curtis along with the conventional side. And then we have JH Fuel, which is our oldest water treatment facility that still serves water primarily to the downtown area and Belhaven. Now, I want to kind of get into how the water treatment process works. And once again, this is a picture of O.B. Curtis. On the left side is really the conventional side, the basins. And then on the right side, once again, that is the membrane system. Jackson water from O.B. Curtis comes from the reservoir. GH fuel actually comes straight off of the Pearl River. We have, will never notice it, but driving along the spillway, we actually have an intake structure. And that intake structure has two 60-inch pipes. And most of you may recall about 2 years ago, we had the system go down due to sedimentation in those pipes. And we had to get divers to come in and help us clean that. But water that comes into O.B. Curtis from the reservoir goes to bar racks. And then we have been just talking about issues during the freeze as it relates to the mechanical raw water screens. Well, they go through the raw water screens. We have two. We have one for the conventional side and one for the membrane side. And both of those help filter out any trash that may come in from the reservoir before it goes into our conventional or membrane side of the plant for treatment. We also have raw water pumps that help bring the water in at a certain level through the plant. And we have roughly close to 5 or 6 of those for O.B. Curtis. We have some that are dedicated for the conventional side, and we have some for the membrane side. And then the pre-oxidation basin, where the settling water will come in before we start to treat it. Now, once we get into the treatment process, the rapid mix, the flocculation basins, and then the sediment basins, where we primarily do a lot of the treatment processes for the raw water that comes in, where we add chemicals for treatment processes. All of that is done before it actually goes to the clear well. Now, this is a major component of the process of water. I'm gonna take a slide back. What we believe and what happened during the freeze is that water that came in from the reservoir was around 48 degrees, and that is very cold. And so, number one, it was very difficult to treat water at that particular temperature. As far as chemicals, the coagulation process was very difficult. But then most importantly, the importance of those raw water screens that help us gauge the flow that comes into the plant, they froze. So you have cold water that's coming in, you have freezing temperatures on the outside, basically shut down. So the analysis of the computer crash was kind of brought the sense of how this particular system just kind of crashed at that particular moment when you had 2 winter storms that came in a period of over 4 to 5 days, dropped the temperatures, temperature of water, temperature on the outside, both of those together, inability to treat water through our normal processes. We saw the system pressure drop. And once that system pressure dropped, of course, there's no water in the system. And so that was the primary reason for the boil water notice because we didn't have system pressure. The final stages, which is the filtration, and then once it's filtered through, we have 6 UVs on the conventional side, and then it goes to the disinfection and ultimately to the clear well. That clear well can get up to around 14 feet. That is where we provide clean drinking water into the distribution system. On the membrane side, I didn't show that. I didn't know how much time I had. But when those 6 trains are working, they offer that same filtration process. And then that goes into the clear well and ultimately into our distribution system.
So Dr. Williams, can I recap just to make sure that I understood, and since I'm kind of simple, it might help everyone else. We take water directly at the O.B. Curtis plant, which is on the reservoir, directly out of the reservoir through those big concrete structures. When you're driving over the spillway, you'll see those big obelisks that's sitting in the before you get to the spillway as you're traveling east. And then it falls down those tubes on the other side of the reservoir besides the trailer park that's there, and that's where the plant is. And then you're saying that the first step is that big, it comes in and goes through those screens, and that's where you're getting a lot of the big solids. And I'm sure you probably see fish and trash and leaves. And it was so cold, it created an ice block. So it just became ice. So nothing can go through ice. But if it's usually something along those lines?
Yes, well, primarily ice that formed on the screens. Of course, the cold water basically, just shut it down.
Got it.
And
If I could jump in for a moment, because I want to make sure that we're scratching where people are itching. And I've seen a question come up, well, why can't we have a system like Cleveland, Ohio, right? Well, the reality is that that's not the way our system was built, right? Yep. Those cities that experienced colder temperatures built weatherized systems. And so they anticipated the cold weather when they built those systems, because they know that, dropping below 32 degrees is common in those cities. And so, and that happens all the time. And so that is not the system. That is not the way our system was built, right? It's revisionist history. Whether it should have been is it's not as important as who created the problem, as who is responsible for fixing it. And now we have to fix the issue.
That's why we have big back porches, and Cleveland, Ohio doesn't have big back porches, because we have more temperate weather.
Yeah.
So the other thing I heard you say, Dr. Williams, I think it's important, since I'm in the restaurant business, I understand what a slurry is. When you have Chinese food, the reason the Chinese food tastes so good is because the sauce is thick and it covers. When you get General Chow's chicken, it's delicious because it's thick and sticky. That's because they put cornstarch and honey, and those things are coagulants. And so you can take water and mix in cornstarch. We all know how to make gumbo, it makes it thick. So what we have is a chemical process. I guess that those chemicals grab other particles and make them fall out of the mixture, right? And so again, when it's super cold, you end up with dough as opposed to ending up with water. Would that be kind of a simplistic way to look at it?
Yes, I would agree with that.
All right. And then it goes through and gets the finer filters, and then it gets UV light. And then, as I've read many times, the city of Jackson water, when it comes out of the plant, is some of the best water in the nation by the way it's treated. But now we're going to get to the rest of the story and why it may come out brown or different colors in your tap as we get to the distribution side.
So lastly, the finished water, we pump that water into the distribution system. I'm sure that you have heard over the past couple of weeks the importance of having adequate PSI. And as the mayor alluded to, we did drop down to around 37 PSI. And we would like the system to be as designed in the high 80s, around 90 PSI, so that we can get water to all of our citizens, especially those that live in South Jackson, which is farthest away from the plant. But the distribution system is a connection of pipes, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. But ultimately, I hope this schematic kind of gives an idea of that process of the water treatment process at the plant, and how important it is. Okay, water mains, I'm sure we have all been accustomed to the number of water main breaks that we've had, in the previous years. I think we can go all the way back to 1989 when we had a major freeze in the city. And then in 1994 and into the 2000s and just recently 2018, we roughly have around 1,500 miles of water mains throughout the city. And as alluded to, we have two distribution plants, O.B. Curtis, which is off the reservoir, and JH Fuel, it's in the waterworks curve. We estimate the system water loss around 43%. Based off of the 2013 Water Master Plan, 8% of our water lines are over 100 years old. Some of those are in the downtown area. We have about 97 miles of 2 to 4 inch water lines. We also have water mains that are around 6 to 8 inch, which you will see in neighborhoods. A lot of our larger lines, which are 12 inch lines or possibly 16, are on some of our major arterials. And they provide the bulk of the water that comes from our main distribution lines. We have, I'm sure everybody remembers, around 2017, the spring of 2017, when we had to make a repair on the 48-inch. That's around 220. And there was, we anticipated a major water shortage or outage at that particular time to make those two repairs on a 48 and a 42. So those are what we consider our major distribution lines. We also have a 24-inch that comes out of fuel that goes on the east side of the Pearl River that provides water to Byram and some parts of South Jackson. So those are some of our major distribution lines, but most of the lines you will see within the certificated area of Jackson are 16s, 12s, 8, and 6s. Our storage water tanks on the surface water side, the most recently constructed was Mill Street and Fortification Street. We have Chastain, Magnolia Road, Elaine Street, Northwest, Riverside, Livingston, Suncrest. We have a tank that's in Byram, Forest Avenue, and we have 2 booster stations. The Magnolia Road booster station is in service. Currently, the Maddox Road booster station is not. On the well system, we have Maddox Road, Presidential Hills, Highway 18, Cedar Hills, and Spring Ridge Road. And that's on the well system. So just kind of sums up the water side. We'll talk about the sanitary sewer after we treat the water. Then ultimately, when we use it, it will go into the sanitary sewer system. And as we talk about the wastewater treatment process, the process of treating and reclaiming water from wastewater is any water that can be used in homes, such as flushing toilets, washing dishes, or bathing, and some water from industrial use or even stormwater. Starts with the expectation that after it is treated, it will be clean enough to re-enter the environment. As you know, just as we have water issues, we have sanitary sewer issues that pretty much can balance it out. And over a number of years, the collection system has seen a lot of disruptions. Obviously, we have a consent decree that was levied against the city as a result of management at Savannah Street and also SSOs. The city of Jackson operates 3 wastewater treatment facilities. Savannah Street is our primary, which is in South Jackson. Presidential Hills, which is in West Jackson and right off of in the Presidential Hills community. We recently performed some work around 5 to 6 years ago and made some upgrades to that particular facility. And Trayon Creek, which is at the Jackson Rubbish Landfill, which is also in South Jackson off of 55 South. We roughly have the same amount of sewer mains, around 1,500 miles. We have a little over 98 lift stations throughout the city of Jackson. We have roughly 500 plus sanitary sewer overflows that could occur per year. As I stated earlier, in November 2012, the city of Jackson did enter into a consent decree with the EPA and MTEQ, primarily regarding SSOs and operations of the Savannah Street wastewater treatment facility. And a lot of that has to do with bypassing at that particular time.
Charles, can you say what an SSO is? That's an acronym that may not be familiar.
Yes. A SSO is an event in which untreated sewage is discharged from the sewage collection system into the environment prior to reaching the sewer treatment facility. These discharges endanger human health, cause property damage, and can degrade our local water quality. Typically, the SSO events experienced by the city of Jackson collection system, they're caused by excessive flow, which we consider I&I. Sometimes it's by collapsed pipe and grease and fat buildup that can create blockages. Also, with roots and solids that can impede the flow, and it will come out at the manhole. A lot of times we'll see an SSO after a rain event. Typically that's through an I&I, but also too, a lot of, depending if there's nearby trees or if there's a specific amount of buildup within that pipe, it can cause the flow to be impeded and ultimately will come out at the lowest point, which is sometimes at a nearby manhole. This is a picture of a sewer collapse that happened about 2.5 years ago on 3 Mile Creek. 30-inch concrete sewer main collapse, rode it off the embankment, caused a significant amount of flow, sewer flow to go into 3 Mile Creek. This is another snapshot of it showing once it fell off the embankment, there were lots of gallons of raw sewage that entered the creek until it was repaired. This will be considered an SSO because it is an illicit discharge into a nearby creek. One of the major problems that we have is grease. It takes a lot of effort in order for us to clean the grease out of manholes that can cause flow to get blocked. And so these are just 2 pictures just showing the after fact of us cleaning out a particular manhole that was full of grease. We do have a fog program that is implemented throughout the city to help alleviate and mitigate that problem.
Dr. Williams, I'd love to jump in just for a second and help explain what happens with restaurants, our favorite fried chicken places and places like ours that use a lot of butterfat. The city and all cities require restaurants and commercial facilities that make food to have what's called a grease trap, which is a very large, usually in-ground filter, if you will, that all of our sanitary water goes through. So the dishwasher, hand washing stations, not the toilets, not that, but everything that's hand washing or coming off of dishwashing or prep sinks. And it filters out, it scrapes the grease out, and then we pay a private contractor to pump it on a regular basis. And we work with the city based on usage to prove pumping. So most restaurants might pump every 3 months. We happen to pump every 2 months in our places. And you pay the fee, the place comes out, they suck all the grease out, and then they drive it down to the Savannah Street plant to discharge. The reason these are really important is it stops what you're seeing right here from getting into the pipes. At home, garbage disposals are the worst possible thing for our city. Anytime we can put our, I've done a good job in our house. We kind of all learned this process. Instead of throwing things down the garbage disposal, we throw things in the garbage can and try to minimize the things we grind up, because the more stuff that goes down, the more things that get stuck. So that's maybe one of those things as we go to our churches and our friends, as we go through this process, the less solids we throw down, the less sticky stuff, the better the sewer pipes will work. Is that fair, sir?
Fair.
Thank you.
This public service announcement was provided.
So as I stated earlier, the way that the wastewater treatment process works, Savannah Street is our primary treatment facility. It was constructed in 1970, put online in 1974. Veolia North America helps the city manage as an O&M operator. Roughly, we can treat up to around 46 MGD of waste that comes through the plant and treat it. This is just a high level of how that works. Of course, we bring wastewater into the plant. We screen it. And then there's a grit removal chamber. We have clarifiers that help in the primary stage of it. Then there's the aeration part of it. And I'll kind of lay this out in the next slide. But this is just a high level figure of how that process works. And then we have a secondary clarifier. We have a chlorination part of it. And then ultimately we test the water before we put it into, allow it to be discharged into a nearby creek or stream. And these are just some notes about that particular process. I hope everybody can see that. But bar screening, that's the removal of large items from the influent to prevent damage to the facility's pumps, valves, and other equipment. There's quite a lot of debris that can get into a sewer line main that comes in. The West Bank Interceptor is the city's primary truncate for sewer. We have a number of other large sewer mains that are interceptors, or what we call, that actually tie into the West Bank, that come down to ultimately end at Savannah Street. The screening is the removal of grit by the flowing the influent over through a grit chamber. And then the primary clarifier, that's the initial separation of solid organic matter from wastewater. The aeration, which is a very important process where we pump air into the aeration tank basins to encourage conversion of ammonia to nitrate, provide oxygen for bacteria to continue to propagate and grow. Secondary clarifier, treated wastewater is pumped into a secondary clarifier to allow any remaining organic sediment to settle out of treated water flow. And of course, there's chlorination, where chlorine is added to kill any remaining bacteria in the contact chamber. And then finally, we'll test it to make sure it meets our permit before ultimately discharging into a local creek or river, which would be the Pearl River for Savannah Street. That is just a high level of how the treatment process works for wastewater. Of course, we have not perfected that, obviously, because we have a consent decree. So we still have a lot of work to do. But we have made some major improvements at Savannah Street through a $27 million SRF loan, where we are building new clarifiers. We're doing upgrades for electrical work at the plant. And so a lot of good things that are happening at Savannah Street that will help us minimize the number of bypass events that occur that could ultimately affect our permit and put untreated wastewater into the Pearl River. And lastly, the mayor touched on this, and I won't go into much detail, but obviously, how do we pay for the water treatment facilities and the distribution? And this is just a quick breakdown of the enterprise fund. The enterprise fund is where we pay for water and sewer, and it's utilized for that service. That ultimately, when we pay our water bills, and for us, it's water bills and sanitation, which is separate, but it does go into the enterprise fund. But we set up the enterprise fund to help cover the expenses for O&M, capital outlay, and any type of debt service that may be incurred by the enterprise fund. So a fully functional enterprise fund obviously would promote better services out of both water and sewer moving forward. So the mayor did allude to the AMI projects that will be coming online to help solidify that. But obviously, we are welcoming any financial funding resources to assist the city with those improvements while that stabilization work is ongoing as far as the AMI work, the metering work. And that is it.
Dr. Williams, before we jump back into, I think, the funding and some questions and answers, which I think is going to be probably the appetite for the crowd, I would like to ask one more system that you're responsible for that has to do with water, and that is the storm drains. And so just so I make sure that I'm correct and everyone listening is correct, storm drain is separate than sewer line. So when we have rainwater coming off the roads and going down the storm drains, that doesn't go into the sanitary sewer. That's a separate set of lines that go to the river. Is that correct? Go to creeks and the like, and everything flows to the river eventually?
That is correct. We have a separate system from sanitary sewer and storm. It's not a combined system.
And as you alluded, in some neighborhoods where there's been some degradation between sewer and storm, when there's rain and a flood, it can very simply tip into the sewer system, flood the sewer lines, tip the manhole covers, they start to rumble, And then that's one of those problems we have with the EPA as well, is that in neighborhoods, we have spill outs of sewage because the storm drain is affecting that as well.
Well, the I&I normally comes in if there is a break in the sewer main where flow can get in, and it can come from, just off the street.
Okay.
That seeps into the ground, or it could be excessive groundwater. You would want your collection system to be sealed until it gets to the treatment facility.
Right.
But as you know, Jackson's collection system, there's certain areas where it's compromised. Either we'll have a collapse or a break in the system. And ultimately, if stormwater can get in there, either through having a break in the system, and then you will have that excessive flow that sewer collection system was not designed to handle. And so it's going to come out at either a manhole because there's too much flow that's getting into the system.
If I may interrupt, I just, I'm seeing some of the questions coming through. And so what I want to do is, is address some of those just to make sure that we're scratching where people are itching. And I know we end up using a lot of acronyms. Someone asked again, what is the enterprise fund? The city has two sides of its budget. You have your general fund, right? That's where, your tax revenue, what you get from the state based on tax revenue, grants, and all of those things are on the general side, the general fund side. And then you have your enterprise fund. Your enterprise is your business, just like your enterprise is as restaurants. You run a restaurant enterprise. The city has a monopoly. Most cities have a monopoly on providing water to people. And so that is our enterprise, where the funding for that is maintained separate. And so when we get into our bond rating, when we get into those things, you have to separate, and you cannot commingle those funds, right? And so our enterprise fund is where we have trouble. In fact, we've actually recovered quite substantially from our general fund side, but we can't just make a transfer without consequences from our general fund to our enterprise fund, right? Most places, when there is a need to transfer a fund, it is usually your enterprise. It is usually a business that loans to your general fund. In fact, when I kind of travel the country and I'm at conferences with other mayors, sometimes they gather around because it's so it's such an unusual maneuver to have to give money from your general fund to your enterprise fund. And that's where, we get into the water billing issue and those things. And then I think somebody answered that question. That's inflow and infiltration. One other question that we had, someone asked about, and I think this is slightly on a different plane, but they asked about protecting against cyber attacks. One of the other challenges that we had, and they're talking about that in terms of water treatment facilities. And I think that is an important question. First and foremost, we have, 24-hour security at our water treatment facilities to protect against, someone trying to attack in that way. But another thing that we had to do is not only did we have this issue with water bills being a problem because of the meters, because of the interface, but we also had a problem that we had, outdated servers that maintain the billing information, that maintain all of the information that allows bills to go out. We have to maintain that information. And they were on servers on the ground that were constantly crashing. And so what we did was we took those, this is what we call the lift, shift, and enhance. We took them off of those servers that were on the ground, that were compromised by the elements in the room, that were compromised by their age. And we took all of that data and we put it in the cloud, right? That way, in a secured cloud, to make certain that we protected your data, to make certain that we have the necessary foundational information that as we build this water billing system, that we can get out bills accurately and consistently.
This has been an overwhelming amount of information. And Mr. Mayor, thank you for addressing some of the questions that are coming in. We wanted to make sure that any, I like the scratch where you itch, if there's any other question that needs to happen, we have a few minutes here. We want to make sure you type it in. We have other folks that have been on screen here that run various and sundry departments within our city. Carla, since we're still in the world of water, sewer, and the like, is there anything you'd like to share from the billing department side and kind of enhancing what the mayor and Dr. Williams was saying about the reform that's going on there? You're muted, so come on.
I'm trying to find the button. He's right. We're putting together a very comprehensive plan that's kind of a holistic approach to the system. We're working on the software that's not reading the meters. We're working on the meters that are not communicating to the software. And we're also taking a deep dive into making sure that we have the right staff with the right skills here to be able to navigate these complex systems that we've basically handed them to be able to use. So, I mean, it's a whole approach. I think the IT department's procuring a phone system next week because we're having a hard time keeping our phone systems up and not answering the calls. And it's not because we don't want to, it's because the network's down. And so, we're looking at this as a holistic approach. Like, we're coming at it from every angle. So I'm really excited with the work we're doing.
I know that you and I have discussed customer service a lot of times when I've seen you at Broad Street, and you are very focused on trying to continue to enhance and lift, to use the mayor's term, for the cloud services, also the physical services of the folks that you're working with. And it's hard to be in customer service, especially when everyone who calls you is yelling at you because they're mad about their bill, or they're coming in because they don't have enough money to pay. It's a very, I think we all need to be sensitive to the fact that y'all have a very difficult job and there's no love. Very few people call and say, thank you very much for what you're doing. So we just.
Actually, that's not true. We get flowers, we get cookies, we get desserts brought up here. I mean, the ladies that are here, these are complex problems. When someone hadn't had a bill in 4 years and they're, or not that long, but many years, and their meter, we can't get it commissioned or whatever, somebody keeps parking on it and breaking it. It takes a long time to work this out, and all the ladies here are really dedicated. It's just really hard for them to navigate the system sometimes, the complexities of the software. So we look at it as a great opportunity to help. And one thing that we're doing in this new software exchange is we're creating a digital self-serve platform. So customers will be able to start their own service, stop service, move service, pay with a credit card, pay online, all from like an iPad or their cell phone. And what this does is gives the customer opportunity to take ownership of a lot of the problems that we have here with data, and they can manage their account and have more confidence that what we do send out will be correct.
Thank you, Carla. That's wonderful. That's outstanding. Before finishing with a couple of questions and answers, and Mr. Mayor, there are a couple in there that are pretty big questions you might want to scroll through. But Jordan, as the head of planning and development, you are in charge of, you see all the building permits, you see the economic development side. This is being hosted. One of the questions was, what was the audience for this? We're a business organization, but I am a person who's a bit of a populist. I'm in the populist business. I thought it was very important that this was an opportunity for business people, but people to learn about this system. Jordan, you work with businesses and you see, apartments and commercial businesses asking for permits, and you have economic development bids that come through. How does all this wrap into your work, and what do you see for the future?
Sure. I kind of want to take this question in two parts. One, how we look at the physical design of our city to support financially the amount of miles of water and sewer that we have. And secondarily, just the understanding of how impactful water consistency and quality is to a lot of the businesses that operate in this city. I think we've had a lot of conversation in the past couple of weeks about its impact on people and their ability to live, bathe, cook, take care of children, etc. But we haven't had a lot of focus on the actual impact on business. If you operate dialysis, healthcare, any sort of business that's water critical, we're often creating a situation that frustrates those businesses, and being able to deliver consistent water is extremely important for when those type of places are looking at site locations in your city. Some have worked around it through installing their own systems. Some have contingency plans, but as I do work with larger format recruitments, that is one of the things that is really important for us to be able to answer is, can we sufficiently deliver that water when they're simultaneously seeing annual to biannual interruptions and hearing from their neighbors. So it will be great to see as some of this financial attention, I believe that's coming from the federal and the state level country and across the country into infrastructure, hopefully makes its way into our system over the next few years in order to kind of stabilize some of those things that are causing that to happen. But the second part I think is actually more important, and that is we need to talk about density. In 1987, the city had about 40,000 more people in the city than it did today. And in 1976, the city had a footprint that is substantially less than it is today. And in 1949, we had a very dense footprint. As we grew from the 1950s up to now, we actually spread out. So you have more meters previously per linear foot on those lines, more users, which means more revenue. But as you spread out with the more modern suburban footprints that were brought into the city from the 70s forward, you actually have less people per foot of those lines using them. So the math changes. So as we do our planning work and on this version of our comp plan, if you haven't visited that yet, it's connectjxn.com. We are looking at focusing on that redensification. And you've already seen it in parts of the city as we've repopulated downtown, as we've repopulated the Fondren district, as new development is coming into Jackson, but we haven't seen it happen throughout our whole city yet. So as we plan for the future, we're looking at ways to make our existing infrastructure useful again. The more folks that are using it are more folks paying to maintain it going forward. And so while there have been some things that have challenged us over the years, the fundamental nature of population loss and business loss has definitely played a role. And we'll see our new census numbers come out in September for the 2020 census. And it is my hope and my fingers are crossed that we see stable numbers in our population, or maybe some incremental improvements in some of our census tracts, because that is one of the key factors in looking at us going forward over the next 20 to 30 to 40 years, is building a system that is mathematically sustainable.
If I can jump in, and I thank you, Jordan. As you can see, we have some very gifted people with the city of Jackson, people who know their field of discipline and understanding, and you know, are prepared to address these things. I saw one question I think is kind of one of those overarching questions that really speak to a number of the questions that have been listed, and that is, what are we doing about it, right? And you know, I think it's important that as we've talked about these issues, you can see that we have a depth of knowledge in terms of what the problems are. The solution, however, is how we bear the resources, or bring the resources to bear that we can utilize to solve the problem. And so that's why we've been talking about this enterprise fund. That's why we've been talking about the importance of our water billing. That's why we've been talking about those corrective measures that we are employing. You know, I think it is fair to critique whether certain decisions that have happened over time in the city were the right decisions or not, right? For me, hindsight is always 20/20. In addition to that, you know, I don't take things as I would have them to be. I take things as they are, right? And so the system we have, the things that we have to correct, that is our responsibility, and we're working diligently to do that. But we're trying to do so with far more intentionality than we may have pursued when we initially made those investments. And so as we're going through this question of what does our meter look like, and what meter do we trust best, as we look at what the interface and what systems, you know, are able to send the signals and give you the capacity that Carla was talking about, where you can not only, you know, become a customer on your own through the computer and check what your usage rate is and see where your bills are. These are all things that we want to make sure that we do correct and efficiently, and that we have as many checks and balances in place so that we don't get it wrong. So that's what we're doing, right? And we have taken on a lot of grief, right? And a lot of criticism based on our decision to challenge that process and challenge those errors of the past, right? But we're only doing that because we know what the end result is. We know the end result of not doing so means that you have an independable infrastructure. It means that you have water bills that you can't depend on and leave people who are on set budgets meeting challenges. It means that this infrastructure that is unsustainable and inequitable means that not only residents suffer, but businesses suffer. And so that's what we're doing. But this is what I will call up to the individuals on this, participating on this Zoom to do. We need you to lift your voices, right? Because part of the question or part of the issue is that it is posed as Jackson's problem. And yes, Jackson deals with the brunt of this challenge and we suffer the consequences. But the reality is that when Jackson suffers, the state of Mississippi suffers. We are the economic engine. It is your businesses that suffer. Your businesses pay taxes to the state of Mississippi. And yes, we don't get the revenue for our water. Somebody asked that question that we provide to the state. And so if you can lift up your voices and write to your legislative delegation, which I believe are largely in support, let me be clear on that, on the state level, write to the lieutenant governor, write to the speaker of the House, write to your congressional delegation and make it clear that you want to see and you support the funding that is going to help us employ some of these immediate repairs that we have to do. And so that's what we're asking you to do. And we will continue to do our work, both on the city side to make sure we repaired failed infrastructure, both in terms of finance and the actual physical infrastructure we deal with, but also that we will continue to call the very same people that we're asking you to write to, and we will visit them and we will walk into their offices. I was talking to Congressman Michael Guest earlier today as he's trying to help see how they can support. We want a coalition of the willing to work together. We don't care about party or partisanship. We care about results and we care about people.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Dr. Amari, one of my favorite sayings is that still waters run deep. And you always are still, I say 1,000 words and you may say 3. Is there anything that you'd like to mention from your seat, as you are always in the room where it happens, to quote Hamilton?
It's one of my granddaughter's favorite songs from Hamilton is The Room Where It Happens. I've been busy trying to answer as many of these questions in the Q&A as I could. However, some of them are technical and I really don't know the answer, like, is the 43% system water loss, is that normal? Charles, I would punt that to you. And it was something else related to that. But other than that, let me just say that I'm proud to be a part of this team. They consist of the hardest working and some of the smartest people that I've met in my lifetime. And they are all committed to making Jackson a place that we are all proud to call home. And this water situation has really brought out the best in our employees, but also the best in our residents, because we've seen everybody come together to help each other through what otherwise would have been an untenable situation. So I'd really like to say that it's a lot more complicated than it looks on the surface. And there are always so many moving parts that you have to be on top of. But I can say that the recent attention from both national and international press to our plight here has given us a lot of hope that we're going to get at least some of the financial assistance that we've been requesting for quite some time. So Charles, if you could answer that question about the 43% water loss.
Yes, so it is high, and that is a result of from water getting from the plants ultimately to its source. That could be a resident or a business. It could be a result also from a break. It could be through theft from meters. So yes, it is high, It is something that we need to reduce as quickly as possible, but the improvements in the distribution system will help alleviate that. And also too, the improvements in the water meter system will help with that. So a combination of that will help reduce that number.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Thank you to all of our panelists. We're going to try to wrap it up here. I want to let you know that the Greater Jackson Chamber Partnership is going to archive this. Cynthia is going to work very hard to save this down and then save it up. And then we're going to place it on the website. We're going to send out to all the participants, all the folks that registered. We're going to send out the link so you can get to it. I think the idea, and thank you for taking the time for our panelists. This is now an historical document. And so anyone who wants to know how this works, they can watch it. So this is a tool for us to use with those state and national leaders that we've just talked about, that this is a link that can help educate. We can use it in social media. We can do great things with this. I'd like to just finish with one quick story. I don't know when it was, Mr. Mayor, if it was in the late 50s or the early 60s, but at some point in time, State Street was sold to the city of Jackson. State Street is Highway 51, it's a state highway. But at some point in time, a deal was cut for money today, at the point in time in the 50s or 60s, to take a cash payment to take over the responsibility for State Street. I happen to have my office on State Street, that's where I'm talking from now. And I know how bad State Street got. And Mayor Johnson repaved State Street 12, 14 years ago, and it all tore up immediately. We went from having it paved to having 16 utility cuts within 5 blocks within a few years. Congressman Thompson helped to bring the Tiger Grant in, and what we saw, for all of you that have watched over the past, 4.5 years, State Street was rebuilt from the putt-putt there on Shepherd all the way down to Pig and Pint. And it took 4.5 years. And that was rebuilt with water sewer, with water lines, and other utilities underground that needed to be handled. And it took 4.5 years to do that one street. And it's fantastic now. And there are not utility cuts. It's working. But that's how bad this is. And really, you know, I know that Senator Cochran helped with that work for the Tiger Grant. And that was a situation where many came together to help with a situation that was needed to be handled. Hopefully this is a time when we can remember that, you know, who knows why that was sold, but the city didn't have the money to take care of it. And we have, you know, thousands of miles of roads and thousands of miles of water pipes. So hopefully we can all work together on this. Is that a fair way to end this, Mr. Mayor?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that is ultimately the reason that we have this discussion. I believe in the concept, and I'm always open to these type of conversations, not only because it's informative, not only on the side of where we can provide information of how a water system works from the administration, but as we hear these questions, we better understand what's pressing on your mind. And I believe that the more we can engage in unity, debate unity, where we come together, establishing where we're unified, we're all unified, that we want to see a more sustainable, dependable system. Debate where we may have differences, and that difference may be, well, how do we get to that objective? What are the best methodologies to employ? So that ultimately what our goal is to leave the room with a greater sense of unity than we arrive with. And so I'm thankful for this. Look forward to, you know, continued conversation. Please, 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 you know, I think when you lift your voices to speak to this issue, you know, write some of the vested decision makers, then it makes our position stronger. So I ask that you do that. And we want to do everything that we can to support not only our residents, but our business community. Oftentimes we talk about new businesses and trying to bring them in, but we want you to know that we love our existing businesses too. We love you for the sense of place that you create in the city of Jackson. We love you for the service you provide. I was going to ask Jeff if it was appropriate to order a turkey lurkey on this call, or but
all right. Well, you know, ABS always be selling, but I will say this, that look, just quickly glancing through the feed, I haven't had a chance to look at the attendees list, but we had over 400 people sign up for this. We had, I think, a maximum of about 240 online at the top. That's amazing. And I see city council people. I see our Hinds County delegation. I see some state representatives. I see someone from Senator Hyde Smith's office. I do not want to leave anyone out, but I think that the audience, Mr. Mayor, that you were just talking about, many representatives of those offices are in the room right now, and how thankful we are for that. This is a great city. It can be a great, it can be Mississippi's great city, and that's what this is all about. So let's do it. So this will be archived. We'll share it out. Thank you so much. And for those of you that are in the business community, if you like what you saw, the Greater Jackson Chamber Partnership is a great organization to join. And Cynthia Buchanan will send that link out too. All right. Good day, all.
Have a blessed weekend. Thank you.
God bless.